Well, welcome to today's ILP's Masterclass, Critical Thinking for Design of Learning. So this is such a critical, well, I shouldn't say critical, capability. And it's sort of, as I went through our model earlier, ILP capability model, I realized that it sort of virtually can be applied to any one of the dimensions. So I just thought I'd quickly share the model with you. So whether it's your professional attributes with your diversity, continual development, emotional intelligence, strategy or planning when you're talking to stakeholders, transfer strategies, designing and developing learning initiatives, or even facilitating or delivering them as well. So, and when you're evaluating, analysing feedback and reviewing your performance, and even business smarts when you're talking to your clients, financial and budgeting and marketing. So really couldn't see any of those dimensions where we couldn't apply critical thinking. So it's going to be such a useful session this afternoon. And of course, the person running it should be well known to everybody who's a frequent of our masterclasses. So Bill's going to facilitate today. I'm proud to call him a friend. He's a colleague. He's also ILP's COO and a director of his own company, Mindworks International. So Bill also ran a similar session a couple of weeks ago to over 600 people around the world through the CPA Australia. So he's now tailored it for L&D professionals. So I'm really looking forward to see how he approaches it, and yeah, looking forward to learning something from you. I was going to say for a change. No, I'm always learning from you, Bill, but especially looking forward to this afternoon. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Carrie, and welcome everybody. And I am looking forward to the session today, and I'm going to take you through a number of different things. And I like what Carrie was saying about how it affects just about everything, and I think that's the view I have. Before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I sit on with the Wadawurrung people, and acknowledge their elders past, present, and emerging. So guys, what I'm going to do today, I'm going to use a number of slides, and I'm going to do a range of things with you. We're going to do breakout rooms. I'm going to get you to potentially use the annotate on some of the slides, or at least one of the slides. So I want to try different things. What was interesting for me is that when I did the CPA thing, clearly it wasn't a meeting, it was a webinar. So it was basically just me talking to the screen, and there wasn't that interaction. And so this is actually the very first time I've run this kind of session in this kind of an environment. I haven't been working in this area for a while, but when we looked at what we were doing, I thought, well, let me see, play with it. So I'm hoping that you'll find it useful and interesting. I'm also very aware that I've got a whole bunch of people in the room who probably know a lot about critical thinking. So what I wanted to try to do is not just talk about it in general terms, although I will briefly do that, but I wanted then to share with you some methodologies that I've been using that I think might be of value to you. I don't know, but I'll want to get some feedback on that, and put some other things just in background for you. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and get started. And to do that, I suggest that you put me into speaker side-by-side view, because that way then you can manage the screen sizes. You can actually make it larger or smaller so that you can see both me rather than just in a little corner somewhere. I recommend that that's the approach. And we'll go from there. I'll also get you to put things in the chat box on occasion as well, and also open up some discussions. So on that basis, I want to start to share my screen and do a number of things. One of the things I want to do is take you back through a process here. And again, I've not really considered critical thinking for the design of learning transfer, but I was challenged by wanting to do that and having a good look at it. So that's what I'm trying to do with this process. And then I thought to myself, where will I start with this? And I thought in the end of the day, I thought maybe how I got here might be of some interest. So the next thing I want to look at is basically just take you on my trip about learning some of this stuff and where it worked from. Because I think how you develop these skills is interesting. For me, it started in my early days when I was probably 20 years old, starting as a computer operator in big mainframe computer systems. And the only way to get in those days, you did a simple test, and if you had any logic in you, you could come in as a trainee. But what I found was that whole process taught me about analysis, about looking at things. And throughout my 20s, I did that in all sorts of computer situations and things like that. But there was more than that that went on, and I found that I had that ability to ask questions that seemed to draw out interest. One of the things when I left the operations area, I made a decision when I was 21 that I wouldn't look for a serious job until I was 30. So when I turned 30, I had to start looking for a serious job or a career because our first child was on the way, etc. And so what I did is I actually joined one of the major banks in the area of security and control, so computer security, control things, etc. And part of that involved me being the reviewer of major projects, so major development projects, major operational projects. And there was methodologies that they were using that used question sets and things like that to actually begin to understand it. So while I wasn't a technical expert, I was able to use the methodologies to actually ask questions in such a way. And of course, it wasn't just a tick and flick kind of thing. It was actually, you had to get behind the scenes. And I found myself getting to know that process reasonably well. I then went on to do a wide range of leadership roles in a number of different areas. And again, what I found myself doing is that I had to ask questions of the people that were working for me and the people I worked for in order to understand them. So as an example, I might have had a finance manager working for me, along with a facilities and engineering manager, etc. I wasn't an expert in all these areas. So I had to ask questions to learn in order to lead. And that was part of that process. So that's sort of where it started to develop. Then I went into the whole career of what was called TQM at those days, Total Quality Management. But for me, it was just called Continuous Process Improvement. And I trained hundreds of managers and facilitators in that whole process. And in doing that, learned things about statistical process control and understanding what was going on, et cetera. So again, I saw this building of learning to understand and analyze and see what was going on. And then in about 97, I sort of had a vision and it took over what I was trying to do. It was saying, what can I do with all of this stuff that I've been doing? And so I created a visualization of a thing that I call the Academy of Deliberate Thinking. And this was the mind map that I did in June 98 that set the scene for what became MindWorks, but was started out as the Academy of Deliberate Thinking, designed on Plato's Academy of Discourse and Discussion and Question. And that was the basis for where I've been doing most of my work in this last area. Also, because I've been working with people like Edward de Bono and Tony Buzan and other people and followers of them, I wanted to focus my creative or my deliberate thinking on creative thinking, about how to be more creative. And so that's where MindWorks came from. So the background I have for some of this is just a journey of how you develop these processes. So I thought maybe that would be interesting to share that with you, just so that you could get an understanding of where I'm coming from. So let's get started. And I want to talk a little bit about thinking. And one of the things I believe for a long time is thinking is not just an automatic response. Sure, it is an automatic response, but it's not just that. It's actually a process that can be planned and done deliberately. And that's the nature of critical thinking as we push through. So that's the process that I'm coming from. And the question then is why? Why critical thinking? And we'll start to define critical thinking in just a little while. But for me, it's about thinking about the thinking. And people say, well, why do we need to do that? Thinking is just a natural thing. Can't we just do it? And the answer is we can, but I don't think it's enough. And so the two kinds of thinking that tend to dominate one's day tends to be reactive or passive thinking. Reactive thinking is that kind of thinking that you do in response to the world. So a customer calls, an email comes in, they're going to go to school, whatever it happens to be. You need to think about things as it reacts. And that's perfectly fine. That's probably going to be 70% of your day in many cases. The key element with reactive thinking, though, is that you tend to find a situation where the situation is driving the thinking rather than the thinking driving the situation. So again, not bad. We're not saying it's wrong. It's just a case of it's maybe not enough for what we're doing. Passive thinking is a bit different. It's that kind of thinking that you do often when you're calm, when you're in a happy place. Some people will say they do their best thinking when they're out for a walk or listening to some music, having a nice glass of red wine. Some people will talk about doing it when they're just relaxed in their favorite chair. Others people will talk about it in the shower, as an example. And again, it's beautiful. It's really wonderful thinking, because that's when these things come to your head and you can start doing something with them and they take form. The only problem with passive thinking is that sometimes when that answer comes to you, when that idea starts to take real form, if you're standing in the shower, wet and naked, it's sometimes hard to capture it. Or, how many people have gone to sleep and say, oh, and then get an idea in the middle of the night, and by the time they wake up, it's gone. So what we need to do is find a way to actually create that passive thinking in a way that's actually under our control. So that's part of what I'm looking at. So reactive passive thinking, great. What we want to do, though, is be a little bit more deliberate about it. And in fact, we can improve both those kinds of thinkings as well. So that's sort of the background that I had in here. So what I want to do now is I want to open up the discussion, and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to ask the question, what is critical thinking? And by that means, I don't want you to now suddenly race away to find the Google answer for this. I want to get you to share your experience with me and talk to me. What is your view of critical and creative thinking? And again, I put you into gallery view for myself, so come into gallery view if you choose to join in. But I'd just like to throw it open to people. What is critical thinking? What does it mean to you? How would you define it or describe it? David?
Okay, I won't be shy. I like the thing around stuff that happens in the shower or in that liminal zone, like between waking and sleeping and stuff. And so that's part of kind of bright ideas. And then one aspect of working with it is, well, let's evaluate that idea. So one aspect of critical thinking is evaluation.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. Someone else?
Well, I'll jump in. In the work that I've done in the past, we've tended to define it more by its purpose, and that it, helping you to work out what to believe or what to accept as true versus opinion or stuff that's not true.
Yes. Okay. Good. Excellent. Someone else? Todd, did you want to say something?
Bill? Yeah, I'm happy to say something.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just hadn't really thought that deeply about it, and maybe not well versed in the subject there, but even just the word, I think it would be, by definition, putting critical in front of the thinking. What does that mean to me? It would be things that might be, I don't know if I'm right or not, but more critical towards what a task is and the outcome. And I'm even thinking of like with the project management, that critical
path.
Thank you. That was the one. Thank you, Bill. So something along those lines. What we know to be true, maybe. It's critical to get to this point that we do at least A, B, and C. Then the other stuff can be added.
Yeah, good. John, were you going to say something?
Yeah, to me, critical thinking would be more of going through a conscious and considered process to enable you to get towards a better outcome as opposed to just flowing through thinking.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Anyone else?
I was thinking something along the lines of what Jeff was sort of saying in lines like challenging our normal way of thinking. So sort of stepping back and being objective about it.
Yeah.
And sort of rather than your beliefs and values, sort of, influencing
That's exactly what I was going to say as well, taking away our own filters.
Yeah.
Taking away our own filters. Nice. Okay.
I think I like Peg.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Checking, validating, that sort of thing, being objective about it.
Okay, it's very interesting. And again, I go back to when I started to put MindWorks together, and I actually did a lot of research and again looked at that aspect of critical thinking, the terminology. What I found was exactly what's just happened here. A great deal of different views about what it means and what it is, from everything, well, it's critical thinking, therefore it's critical that we do it, or it's a critical issue. Other people were talking about, well, it's about criticizing because you're being critical of something. So again, people had these wide variety of views, and that still exists today. So what I tried to find out is, what is the path here that we can actually use to actually pull it together? And so that's what I want to talk about now. So I'm going to go back onto a slide share. If you want to go back into speaker view, that would be good. And pick up on where we left off, because I think it's important to try to understand some of these things as we move forward. And what you'll see is that I've gone back to the term critical thinking in recent years, only because it started to become fad again, and I wanted to try to bring some sense to it. But one of the things that I learned early in the piece, and one of the models that I like to use is this one that says, critical thinking it lies at the center. It lies at the center of all the thinking that we do. So Carrie was saying before that with the capability framework, critical thinking could apply to all of that. Jeff was just saying that his brother was doing some critical thinking with, I think you said the Air Force, Jeff. I ran a program for Australian Aviation as an example on this kind of process as well. And I've done it with all sorts of organizations. So critical thinking is actually not one thing, it's many things, but it is that structured approach. And so what we can do is we can use critical thinking in problem solving, in planning, implementing, in decision making. And those things are the things that help us to drive strategic thinking and strategy development, or innovation, or creativity, etc. And so my focus area, my passion was in the area of creativity in order to drive innovation later on. So I focused most of my energy in there, but I've also used it when I was doing continuous improvement for problem solving. And I run strategic thinking sessions for executive teams all the time, again, using a critical thinking approach to things. So I don't run strategic planning sessions, I run strategic thinking sessions, and out of that comes the planning process. So that's the nature of what I was doing. Again, in looking around for a decent definition, I found this online organization called the Critical Thinking Community, and it's massive. And they had not one definition, but showed a bunch of different definitions. And the one that suited me the best for what I was trying to do was this one. And again, it's fairly straightforward, and I've taken it straight out of the community. But it said it's a mode of thinking about anything, what we want, in which we improve the quality of the thinking by taking charge of the structures and applying intellectual standards upon it. And so what we're doing is we're thinking about our thinking about our thinking. And because I had experienced that issue of people misunderstanding what critical thinking meant, and the critical word was thinking, I started using the word deliberate. So I called deliberate thinking. And so I created a term called deliberate creative thinking is what I put together. And that became our mantra, if you like. So it was being a deliberate approach, and people seem to understand that a little bit more. So you'll often hear me talk about deliberate thinking as a way of moving forward, but it comes out of that whole body of work of critical thinking that I had developed up over the years. So that's where the definitions that I'm working from. It's not the only definition, but it is one that I found useful for me in the work that I was doing. So let's talk about success in thinking. And for this, I'd like to maybe get you to just take yourself off mute and throw something in. I'm going to leave this up here for a second here, but in success in thinking, there's a number of ingredients that go into that. But there are three vital ingredients. In fact, I will take yourself off share, and so I can see you. So there is three vital ingredients, the ingredients that must be in a successful thinking activity. What are those three things, do you think? And again, you can now put them in the chat box, or you can just take yourself off mute and suggest what are those three things.
Well, clearly the green one's Midori, so.
Would one need, like, to thinking of to have a fire, you need like air, and so the element. So one, if you're thinking, one of the elements would need to be a subject, maybe.
Yeah.
You need to have something that you're thinking, a purpose or a subject,
Something
topic.
So would you agree that it's pretty hard to have something to think about something if you don't have something to think about?
Well, they made a show, didn't they, about Seinfeld? Yeah.
So that would
but
make sense. So you need something to think about. Great, Todd. What else? What else do you need?
Could I suggest you probably need an issue that you're looking to resolve and a possible outcome that you're looking to move towards?
Sure. So that is the something to think about, if you like.
Yeah.
It's the something to think about. It's a problem, it's an issue, what's a task, whatever it happens to be. But there's 3 vital ingredients. We've got 1 so far.
I'm thinking around objectivity or lack of ego or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's part of the process. But of course, a lot of people do thinking without those things, don't they? So that,
in the physiology sense, you actually need a brain to think about that as well.
well, there you go. And where do brains reside?
In the person.
In the people.
Yeah.
So would you agree that it'd be difficult to have a thinking activity without a people? 1 people, 2 people, 10 people, 1,000, 1,000,000 people? See, without people, thinking's not being done. And let's leave the AI out of this at this stage.
Yep.
Right? And the third thing.
Process.
Sorry?
Sorry, process.
Process. Well, I mean, processes can be there. There'll be some sort of process involved, but whether it's haphazard or not, but it's not really an ingredient. It's what we're doing. I'm trying to find what are the things I put into it in order to run the process. What's the third thing?
Ideas?
Ideas is what you get out of it. Right? Or bring into
yeah, I was going to say, I'm putting in an idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Passion
What
or
about
desire?
energy?
Energy, this would be nice. But I mean, how many times you'd have no energy and you're still thinking? So this is the challenge. Because what we want to do is we want to be able to construct our thinking. This is part of what we're doing. So let's think about it. We have something to think about. We have some people to do the thinking. What else do we need? What's the third thing that we need? You cannot do it without this.
Time.
Time. Focus, people, and time. If you don't have anything to think about, you don't have anybody to do the thinking, and you don't have any time to do it, nothing's going to happen. So those are 3 vital ingredients. And for me, in all the structuring that I do, I just keep it at that. That's what I need to have. And when I'm working with organizations, the only things I really need to find out from them is what are they, what's the focus? What's the thing we want to think about, whether it's a problem, a strategy, whatever, who are the people involved, and how much time do we have? From there, I can start to construct what I'm trying to do. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's no wonder I'm at, here today. I'm obviously a genius because obviously I think focus, people, and time, it's brilliant. Who would have known this? But the way I look at it is this: in order to be successful in our thinking, I want us to think about these 3 ingredients like a 3-legged stool. So if you imagine just a 3-legged stool in the area, and what happens is if you have a 3-legged stool where each of the legs is equally strong and equally at the same length, you have a very sturdy structure. You can literally, in some cases, put an elephant on it. But if any one of those legs is shorter or weaker or longer than the others, what happens is that stool falls over very, very easily. And that's what happens in a lot of the thinking that we're doing, is our thinking falls over because we don't have clarity on what it is we're actually working on by everybody in the room, or we're not giving ourselves enough time. And so what I found is that people that I'm working with is saying, we'd like our people to be more creative. I say, well, about what? And they say, well, about everything. Well, that's of no use. How much time are they given each day to think about this kind of stuff? And so what we're not seeing is those elements that come into play. So that's where I start with this process and bring it back. So just to, again, confirm what we've been talking about, the success in thinking is 3 vital things. Call it whatever you like, but one of them is that idea of focus. What is it we're trying to focus on? And the clearer the focus, the better. It doesn't have to be a narrow focus. It can be a broad focus, but it has to be clear and understood by the people that are involved in that. And when people are vested with a clarity of understanding what it is we're trying to do, and they're given the time to do it, we now have the ingredients, the vital ingredients for what we're doing. And that's always the case. That will always be the case in any thinking activity. So how do we actually apply critical aspects to it? Well, part of the way of doing that is to actually add some extra ingredients. And there's a lot more ingredients, like the culture of the organization, the venue, the heating, the also. I want to look at a fourth ingredient, which is bringing us around to this idea of critical or deliberate thinking. And that is the structures and tools that we would use for critical and creative thinking that we can actually use to put it together. And I want to get you to actually do some work with me on this once I set it up, in order for us to try some techniques here today. So that's the nature of what it is we're looking at. So at this stage in time, I want to have a breakout, because I've given you a little bit of information, but what we talked about so far, I want you to now go back and have a think about what structured approaches do you do in your work you're doing, where you're doing some of the thinking processes. So that's the very simple nature of it. What are you thinking about so far as we move forward? And we have, Carrie, you can go into a room with this one as well. So we have 12, 15 people, so that's perfect. What I'll do is I'll put you into 3 rooms, and we'll go from there and see what you're doing. So again, I'll just give you about 5 minutes to do this. What kind of things? And just share with each other some things and bring it back to us as we move forward. Is everybody pretty clear on that? Thumbs up if you are. Beauty, beauty, beauty. Okay, let's break out some breakout rooms. And I'll do, in fact, I might do 4 rooms so that there's more discussion there. That should be okay. If everybody would just join in, that would be great. Kim, are you able to join a room?
Sorry, Bill. I am looking after my baby daughter, who is 17 weeks, and she's on me right now. I'm walking around,
Okay.
so I'm just not that active, and I feel like I wouldn't be a great participant.
Okay, that's no problem. And beautiful little girl.
Yeah, I'll show you a photo.
Oh yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
I guess I could join, but I just don't want to be a bad, an unproductive participant.
I think just join in, and because you can even hear the discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Can you
go ahead?
All right. Thanks.
Welcome back. Welcome as we all come back.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny when you have the technical challenges, isn't it?
Yeah, we made it work though. We're using the chat.
Yeah.
I wonder if everyone got the chat though. That's a question.
I'm not sure.
It had all our names listed, like our 4 names listed. So I figured.
Yeah, it did.
Mm.
It just said when we were responding, it said to everyone though. And that's why I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it would have just been in your own.
Oh, good.
All right, I think everybody is back, which is terrific. So again, just in gallery view, I'd like to find out what you were talking about. What were some of the things that you picked up and contributed at this stage? Just take yourself off mute, and that'll be the signal for me to throw to you. John.
We all had different areas of the thinking process that we touched on. Mine was more core process. Jeff was very much engaging people in the building an appetite or building an interest in an area. Mm-hmm. And Rebecca's was the very much how to get ideas without blocking without any blockages for bad ideas.
All right. Okay. Good. Another group, Carrie.
We had something similar. The first one was sort of like no judgment, so encouraging everybody to sort of contribute. Generating questions, so going to the heart of the problem or the process. Mm-hmm. And Kim came up with a problem, the quote, a problem well framed is a problem well solved. So just making sure everybody was on the same page. And we sort of said some of the techniques we use is De Bono's 6 hats, some mind mapping. David shared a model, ORID. So if you can probably elaborate on that one. And then also framing constraints and prompts was another one that we discussed.
Okay, good, excellent, yeah. And you mentioned the 6 thinking hats. That was one of the areas, that was one of the times when I first really became aware of this structure, because I met Edward in about 86 when he was just releasing 6 thinking hats. And I went along and thought, this sounds like it makes sense. And so I had a team of about 10 managers working for me then. And so I bought 10 or 11 copies of the book and gave them to each of my managers and said, we start Monday, so read it over the weekend. And that's how you created change in those days, by the way.
I remember.
Another group, somebody else.
Yeah, we talked about mind mapping as well. Again, we all had different approaches. We also talked about doing research and just when we did the research, it was about, again, just dumping everything in. So doing all the research, no judgment, nothing like that. Just dump it all in and then sorting it out later. So once you've dumped it in, go back to your focus, and then with your focus, sift it and see what falls out. And just, I think in terms of a group process, I think it's always very important that we put those egos aside and that we just, all ideas are everybody's ideas, sort of thing. Yeah, no winners and losers. Good. We also talked about having a continuous cycle of refining our thinking process.
Yes. Okay, good. Linda.
We talked about tools a little bit. So we were talking about using Miro and using that for all sorts of things, from brainstorming through to storyboarding and analysis, and even using simple tools like Whiteboard in Zoom as a springboard for conversation and thinking and voting on popular decisions. Mm-hmm. And then we talked about ADDIE being a structure that's a process that we work through, and even things like using swim lanes and different models. So we got right down into the models and tools in our discussion.
Into the tools side of things, and again, that's common as well. It's quite common as well. All right, well, thanks for sharing that with me. And what I want to do is I want to build on that, and we're going to come back and have that discussion again in just a few minutes once I sort of talk to you a little bit more, because part of what I try to do in these processes is help people to understand that we're doing a lot of this stuff, but we don't always know we're aware of it. And so the more aware we become of our thinking, the more powerful we can actually make it. So that's the nature of what it is we're looking at. So thank you for that. And so that was the basic discussion. Let me take it a little bit further. And I talk about critical and creative thinking in most of the stuff that I do. Many of my programs are built around that whole idea, as you would have understood. And so what is the process? And part of this is putting the process in place, not just the tools, but the process. And what's interesting, for instance, is that, say, mind mapping, which somebody mentioned, is a tool for organizing thought, whereas, say, Six Thinking Hat is a methodology or process, a set of tools that you can use to actually design your thinking. But there's more to it than just the tool. And so again, we come back to what is the whole process here. And so what I look at this thing, and as I say, once we know what it is we're trying to think about and what we're trying to achieve, what we then can do is define the kind of thinking that needs to be done. And so some of you are describing ideas or analysis or whatever. So depending upon what the focus is, we can define the thinking. And so it could be parallel thinking, creative thinking, analytical thinking, scientific. I mean, there's a whole raft of different types of thinking that we can do. Once we understand the type of thinking we want to do, then what we can do is choose the best tool to do that. And that might be Six Thinking Hats, or it might be statistical process control, or whatever it happens to be. And so there's different things we do. And of course, tools can be applied in many different ways. So again, brainstorming or the apps Linda was just talking about can be used in a number of different ways for things. So what we're doing is structuring this approach to sit back and say, what am I trying to accomplish and what's going to be needed for us to put it together? And then I start to build it up. So that's the nature of what it is we're looking at. So one of the tools that we use, one of the foundations of this talk, which is asking the right questions, is the key. Questions and developing question sets is a key element to what it is we're looking at. And so there's a number of things that are out there, and some of you may have mentioned it already, but there are methodologies in industry. So going back to my days when I was doing those major reviews of major IT projects, we were using a methodology called Method 1 from Arthur Anderson. And it had at each stage the questions that you would ask as you went through that whole process. And again, different methodologies will use them. And you might be aware of some methodologies that you're using for learning design or how you connect with people, things like that in terms of processes. So methodologies that are used in industry as we move forward. What's interesting as well is that a lot of the discussion on critical thinking is just ask the basics here, you know, who, what, where, when, why, and how. And as you dig into that, and again, that's very simple, but it's very powerful in some cases. One of the ones that is been used for millennia, as far as I can tell, is the 5 whys. You know, you just ask the question, why is that? Why is that? Why is that? And why is that? And you got to ask them in the right order, of course, but that's the nature of things. And I mentioned before that I did something with Army Aviation a while ago. And I'd actually had a 5-year contract with Army years earlier, and they brought me back because they'd had a major breach, if you like, a safety breach, and they wanted to find out why. And so they asked me to come back and do a 2-day course on asking why. And I said, well, we could probably go a little bit deeper than that in putting the process together, but that's the nature of things. So simple questions can start the process, but what we're going to do is go a bit further. One of the things we need to be aware of when we're asking questions is that we got to use the questions that are appropriate for the issue and the participants. And this is where the structuring comes into the whole process. And we want the questions generally to be as open as possible. And another area is, and I find the issue of parallel thinking, that is where everyone is in parallel. They're not tackling each other. So it's not pros, con, pros, con, pros, con. It's get all of the pros out, all of the cons out, whatever. That's the nature of Six Thinking Hats as an example, is that's based on parallel thinking. And if it's not done that way, it's a mess. So part of what we want to do is go to that next step. So those are some of the simple and basic processes of looking at things. But what are some other ones? Well, one of the ones that I've come to look at just recently, because we're now partnering with some of the Kirkpatrick people, is this particular one here. And what's interesting for me is this model from the Kirkpatrick Partners. This describes 4 levels, and I've got a model in my hand that's actually got a 5th level on it as well. And what they're talking about is it's actually being used as a model for evaluation. And what they're saying is that what we're doing is we're using it in in this direction. So what was the reaction or the feedback of the participants in the learning process? What kind of things did they actually learn? Level 2, what did they actually learn and take away? And did that change any behaviors in what they did when they got back to work or whatever? And then what were the results of that? And I like that approach. This model that I have here says, and then what was the return on investment of the whole process? So there's that 5th level that could potentially be out there. And I like that process, but I like it from the other direction, because what I would be doing is saying, what are the results you want? Let's know. And again, that's the clarity of focus. Then what behaviors do you want to demonstrate in the thing? So, because without change of behavior, nothing can happen. Therefore, what do people need to learn? And then how do I make it so that they enjoy and get value from that process in the reaction side of things? So what I'm doing is I'm using like a model like this to simply say, how do I design for what is it that I'm trying to do? And that's the fundamental nature of that process. So there are a range of things that we could look at and do. So what I want to do now is, having given you a bit of a feel for structures, like Kirkpatrick, like some of the other ones, what are some of the simple structures that you use? And now, is there anything else that you can think about in terms of that methodology, that process that we're looking at? So can you add other processes that you use in the design for learning transfer? That's what I'm looking at now. So what I want to do is put you back into breakout groups. They're probably going to be different groups again. That's okay. But is everyone clear on what it is we're looking at now? We're not just looking for tools. We're looking for methodologies, approaches, something like that. You may have discussed it already, but let's see if we can dig a bit deeper. Everybody okay with that? You might as well say yes, because you got no choice. I'm in control, so. All right, good luck. Recreate. There we go. And those rooms should be opening for you now.
Oops. Hi there. Hi, Bill. Any chance you could put me in 4? We're just sharing an office. I can't talk across the 2. Sorry, I'm just trying to move Trevor across because it's so hard for us.
Where are you?
I was supposed to be in 1, but I moved out.
Okay, good. All right. Move to 4.
Yeah, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, well, welcome back, everyone. So I'm hoping that that little bit of extra introduction gave you something more to think about in terms of the process rather than just the tools. One of the things that I find useful is it's the combination of tools and methodology that comes together in this whole process. And I want to start to introduce you to some other tools that I use and get you to try them. But can I just get some feedback? Did any from each of the groups, did you get something more out of that? And did you come up with anything further in terms of deliberate approaches that you're using?
Yeah, I'm happy just to quickly start. I want to a big shout out to Jeff on this one. Jeff, you might have recalled a number of years ago in a different life, you came to Townsville City Council. I think it was a day session to do that very topic about the transfer of learning. I was a corporate trainer there many years ago, and lots of, I won't go into the detail because others will, but that was really, really beneficial to make sure that as a corporate training group, we were not just delivering the great training, but it was effectively transferring back to the workplace so we can justify, still being there in our longevity. So that was great.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Well,
I might jump in, Bill. I probably spoke more than I should have, but we ended up drawing in the thinking around psychological safety and using that as a connection to transfer of learning, so that when people go back to work, they feel they can speak up and they can fail, and they're not going to be penalized for it by their colleagues. So yeah, that was one of the key things that Kerry mentioned, the need to get people to show what they've accomplished, and a requirement for that, so that there was some incentive for them to do, I guess, to transfer the learning back into the workplace.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you. Another group?
Okay, I'll dub myself in. I said I wouldn't talk this time, but I'm going to. So along those lines, we talked about, firstly, knowing what the transfer of learning into the workplace would look like. So what are the measurables? So having well-defined objectives there. We also talked about the use of simplifying the complex also, and using storytelling to embed that stuff in terms of getting it into the workplace.
Yep.
And visual thinking. I think that was Kim's. Was it visual thinking, Kim, or visual learning? I can't remember now.
Yeah, visual thinking. Yeah.
Visual thinking. So yeah, having those sort of pictorial elements, which I see on your LinkedIn page, Kim, you're pretty big into. So that just embeds things. It helps with the transfer back into the workplace.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, Imagineering is one of those great tools that you use in order to understand things, and that's certainly been a core to the work I've been doing. So thank you. Someone else? Team 2, team 3. Obviously, you should have nominated speakers. Okay, Beck.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, we followed on from the conversation that you had about the 5 whys, and we talked about format, how to structure your questions using format. And we talked about, if you're going to use something like the 5 whys, just being aware of how you use it as well, because there can be a tendency to go around in circles. So structuring your why questions well.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's why I said, yes, sometimes you think it's tongue in cheek, but they got to be asked in the right order, which seems strange given it's the same question, but it's actually quite real.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. Well, we'll move on then and see how we go with the next, because what I'm about to do is to take you to another level. And on occasions, people will get a little crazy at this stage, but I'm hoping that that's not going to be the case. Because what I want to do now is I want to introduce you to a way in which I go a lot deeper into asking the questions. Because it's one thing to say we want the focus or we want to know what people are involved and things like that. But how do you actually do that? What is the process for that? And I use a wide range of techniques. Having worked with Edward de Bono for many years, I like a lot of his techniques. I think he's one of the best codifiers of thinking that's around, and building on methodologies that come out of the Creative Problem Solving Institute over the last 60 years, and the methodologies they use with divergent, convergent thinking, etc. So this toolkit, we're not going to go through all of it clearly because there's 10 tools involved, but I want to introduce you to them and get you to try using them over the course of the next 20 minutes or so and see how we get with that. We may run out of time. If we do, then that's fine. But this is a range of tools. It was originally developed probably 40 or 50 years ago for primary school children and adapted for business people, simplified for business people. And each of these acronyms here stands for something. So AGO is aims, goals, objectives. FIP is first important priorities. OPV is other people's views. KVI is key values involved. CAF is consider all factors. APC is alternatives, possibilities, choices. PMI is plus minus interesting. Consequence and sequel, CNS. RAD is recognize, analyze, divide. And DOCA is decision, outcome, channel, and action. And I found these tools very useful in putting together my own structure. And I find now that I can use them as a language, if you like. So I want to introduce you to a few of them and just see how we go with this kind of stuff. And hopefully we'll have enough time to make it through. This first one, and I've decided this because if I'm sitting with an organization and I'm trying to understand what it is they're looking at, I need to understand the challenge that they're faced with. So recognize is, and analyze and divide, it's a 3-stage process. Because what we say is, if you recognize something, if you recognize the problem, you know what to do. You just go ahead and but if you don't recognize the problem, then you need to do some analysis in order to understand it. But sometimes analysis doesn't get you where you need to get to. So sometimes breaking the problem down into different ways of doing things is part of that process. So here's something that I tried to, I've never done this online, so we'll see how we go. But it's basically a little activity I use when I'm in workshops. And it has to do with imagery. And the question is always, what is the next image that I'm producing? So as I draw these kind of things, there's the first symbol that I'm putting together. Here's a second symbol that I put together. Here's a third. Here's a fourth. Here's a fifth. And here's a sixth image. And so these are just images. There's symbols, whatever they are. And the question is, do we recognize these symbols? And if we recognize them, then we will know what is the next symbol to put up there. So my question for you is, does anybody know or believe they know what the symbol is? And if they are, would they, I'm not sure I can see the chat box here, but if you think you know the symbol, just say, Bill, I think I know it, or I've seen it before. If not, let's just have some input from people. So do we recognize this, and do we know what the next symbol is? Just say yes or no rather than what it is. And if the answer is no, I'm going to assume that after about 30 seconds or a minute. All right.
No from me.
Sorry? No from you?
No from me, Bill.
Yeah, okay, good.
It's a no from me.
Yeah. Okay. So.
No idea.
Sorry?
No idea.
No idea. Okay. And that's pretty standard. That's pretty standard with people coming up. And so what we do is we're now faced with a challenge coming up. What is the next image? And we don't recognize the images, so we don't know what the next answer is. So what we then move is to the analyze stage. So as you analyze it, and again, I'll take you through this rather than to speed the process up. What you might notice as you analyze it is that there's similarities and differences in the way the images are. For instance, the first one and the fourth one look a little bit like an M. And the first one's got the M with the line at the bottom. The next one's got the line in the middle. The other two in between are sort of variety of things. There's no obvious connection to them except they've all got roundy bits. So what might the next symbol be? And you say, well, it would make sense that it would be some sort of an M. And you notice that the line on the first one is at the bottom. The next one is sort of halfway up. So maybe the next one is at the top. Does that make sense? Just say yes or no.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It makes sense as far as you said, but why the M?
Why in the sequence? Yeah, why sequence?
Yeah, why the sequence? And the reality is that we can analyze it. That's actually pretty good analysis because you're looking at what's going on there. But in fact, it's not correct. It's not a correct answer. And the reason for that is the nature of what it is we're looking at. So if the analysis doesn't get us there, then what we need to do is divide. So what does that mean? Well, it means breaking something down into pieces. So as we start to think about how we might break these down, we could divide them in a particular way. And I've, again, set it up for the purpose. But if we break these down and divide them up, what we can do is divide that one. Now, what does that look like?
1.
1,
2,
3.
Yeah. 4, 5, 6, so 7.
So the next one is, that's the symbol, and that's what it looks like. So what we've got is a situation that says we don't see it, we bruise the tool. Now this is just a puzzle, of course, rather than the process, but you get the idea that we can actually start to break things down into different ways of doing things. So thank you for playing along with that, and thank you for not knowing the answer, because that would have really ruined it for me. But thanks for that. So let's move on, because RAD is recognize, analyze, divide. Once I know what it is that I want to work on, what we can then use is a tool called AGO, aims, goals, and objectives. And so it simply asks the question, what is our aim here? What are the goals we have? And what objectives do we have for the immediacy of things? So aims, goals, and objectives. Pretty straightforward. Again, these things are designed to be simple, but they are quite powerful as we move forward. And the third one I then want to look at is APC, alternatives, possibilities, and choices. So this is basically about what alternatives do we have at this stage? What possibilities should we explore? Or, what other things can we actually put it into? So choices, what choices do we have? And it isn't necessarily using all of these. It could be any one of these things. It is basically an ideation tool where we can actually create ideas. So again, what I want to do is get you into a quick breakout room, and I want us to assume something. I want us to assume that we've done a basic recognize, analyze, divide. We've done a basic AGO, aims, goals, and objectives. But in this case, we're leaving that a little bit open. We're actually asking you for some ideas. So the organizations seem to be losing staff productivity when they work from home, which we want to reverse. It used to work okay, but we're now finding that we're losing productivity. So what alternatives or ideas does L&D have that might assist with this? And what I'm going to do is, so what ideas could you have in order to help increase productivity when people are back working at home? So I'm going to put you into the breakout rooms, and then when you come back, I'm going to ask you to put up some of the ideas, maybe 3 of the ideas up on the whiteboard, and then I'm going to get you to vote on them, and then we're going to do a second activity to actually see how we can pull that together. Is everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Good stuff. I'm recreating, and off you go. And Trevor, if you need me to put you in another room, you can let me know.
Yeah, sorry, Bill. Can I go to 4?
Yep. There you go.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hey, Carrie. Hey, Bernice.
Hey there.
You sharing the room with Trevor?
It sounds like you might be the spokesperson for us, Kim. That sounds excellent.
Ah, I left.
Did you want to go back in?
What was that, David?
No, it's all right. I must have hit
Right, okay.
something. They talking. They'll come up with something. I did give something. So
Good.
they'll use it or not. It's fine. But
we only need,
yeah.
we only need a few ideas. So
Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah, I must have hit. Go back to return to main room or
Yep.
something.
yeah. Okay. Well,
I was just thinking about, I was looking at the possibility side that
all right. So everyone's back. Thank you very much for that. What I'd like to do now is go to the whiteboard and get you to put up just a few ideas for me. All I need is a few to come up there. So pick your couple of best ones and put them up there. Does everybody know how to use the text box and the annotate and everything?
I don't know if I have the permission to use it.
You should be able to
annotate. Yeah, found it.
Annotate at the top there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just go ahead and share. Different people just capture some of the ideas that you put up there that you think would answer the question.
Bill, Todd checking in. I haven't used the whiteboard before. Is it only one person?
No, everybody.
At any time, is it? Like I can just type on there? Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
Okay,
that's right.
thank you.
Well, what you do is you use the text, annotate to put text, and then just start typing, and then move away from it.
Okay.
Just click away, and it should go up there. I use.
Oh yes, I see. I see. Yes, found it. Okay.
Get the group together. All right. I'm starting to rapidly run out of time, so I'm going to get this to. All right. We'll just leave it at that, I think, at this stage. Thank you very much for that. What I want to do is now I want to come down to one idea that we can all work on for just a few minutes. So what I'd like you to do is grab the little vote bar with the little image bar and use that to put a vote in. I think everybody knows how to do that.
You use the stamp.
Use the stamp. That's it. Just like I lost it in front of me and I couldn't remember the name. So stamp. Mm-hmm. All right. Let's take a look at that, and I think that's probably coming pretty clear to us. If you want to take a screenshot of that, that might be useful, or just make a note of it. But I think Carrie's the person that does all the best adding up. But I think from my perspective, get the group together to determine why the productivity has dropped and what's changed. What's changed looks to be the number one thing. So that's what I want us to focus on and work with. So here's what I want to do. I want to share with you 3 more tools on how to actually make that happen. And we'll see how they work. We'll just see how they work because that's an interesting thing. So so I'm going to put you into a breakout room again. In this case, we're going to be then going a little bit further forward. So we've been to the whiteboard, we got our ideas, we've got 3 tools. And what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to put you into just 3 groups. And each group is going to use a different tool. This tool is called plus minus interesting. So we have a suggestion, an idea about getting the groups together and doing that. Plus minus interesting is basically like pros and cons with interesting thrown in on top. What are the pluses of that idea? What are the pluses of that idea? What's the minus of that idea? And what's interesting about that idea? And interesting could be, it would be interesting to see if people would be open and free to talk if they were in a group. Minus might be, we might, get people to be more angry because they're hearing other people's dissatisfactions or whatever. So again, plus, minus, interesting. And, just come up with a 2 or 3 on each of those if you can, and put it together. That I'm going to give to group 1. So when you go into your breakout room, that is group 1, plus, minus, interesting. Second tool that you could have is OPV, other people's views, So this looks at when you can't have the right people in the room, you can actually say to yourself, who are the people involved and what would their views be? So in this particular case, who would have a view of this suggestion? Think about hierarchy, think about the nature of the people that might be there. You might have to make some assumptions around that. OPV, other people's views. Who are the people involved and what might their views be? And again, first step is identify 2 or 3 other people and a couple of views that they might or might not have. That would be the way to go. And that's group 2 that's going to be doing that. And the third one is consequence and sequel, CNS, consequence and sequel. If we take this action forward and get these people together to find out what's changed, etc., what's the consequence and sequel of that? What's the immediate consequence that's going to take place? And what sequence of events might follow that if we pursue that approach? And again, these things can be positive or negative. It's just visualizing in your mind what is actually going to happen if we do this. So I hope that makes sense. And on that basis, what I want to do is say, at this stage of time, we know that thinking is hard, but if it's important, then it's probably why we should be doing it as much as we can. So at this case in time, we did get some ideas, so I'm happy about that. What we want to do, though, is when we design for learning transfer, we want to pre-think our ideas. We don't want to just do it. We actually want to visualize it in our mind. So what I want to do is use those 3 tools, plus, minus, interesting, consequence and sequel, and what was the third one?
Other people's views.
Other people's views, yeah, see? Because I don't have any notes in front of me. I just work blind here. So on that basis, I'm going to put you into 3 groups, group 1, 2, and 3. So 3 has got the consequence and sequel. And again, breakout rooms, I'm going to options. What I can add a room, but I can't take a room away. So I'll just recreate and then I'll move somebody around. Oh no, here we go. Okay, recreate. Open rooms, go in there. And again, it's just a case of 3 or 4 minutes because again, I'm out of time. Move to 2.
Sorry, I was on mute. Move to 2, thank you.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thanks.
Bill, I seem to always come back early. I'm not sure. I didn't touch anything this time. Just here we go.
Here we go. Sorry, I had to bring you back early. I hope you were able to make a little bit of headway there. I like the interaction, but it tends to take over the time. Plus minus interesting. What were some of the pluses and the minuses? One or two of each?
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly. Everyone gets to hear and see how everybody else is. There's a sharing of feelings and probably generation of new ideas.
Yep.
Well, the pluses, negatives could be a talk fest. Might be somebody might feel they're the only one, or might discover they're the only one feeling that way. Could be a negative environment created from that. Interesting. We looked at possibly interesting to see who might be the dominant voice or the effect of the facilitation on the outcome, and possibly how people might react.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Excellent. OPV.
I'll go.
Okay, John. Yeah.
I'll hold back only so long before it's a case of let's get this thing moving. We sort of looked at, okay, so what other people's views might you look at if we were resolving this? So you've obviously got the team, but what other views might you start to explore? And it was suggested HR, that you might want to explore their views. You might want to actually look at an engagement expert, where people are used to looking after remote workers. So it was very much originally around, well, whose opinions might we seek that would be able to help us resolve that? And then it was the sorts of opinions we might want to look at would be, okay, so do we exploring their working conditions? Are we exploring their pressures from home? We're exploring problems that the individuals might not actually have their head around.
Yeah, okay, good. So again, there's a range of people involved in anything there. Some of them are in the room, some of them are not in the room.
Yeah.
Their views could be important on this whole thing. Great.
Yeah.
And consequence and sequel.
Okay, off I go again. One of the consequences is we could make it worse. Getting everybody in together in the room might make it worse. Positive consequence is that just getting people together might be helping with the problem. And one other consequence was that we might find out it's something external that we've got no control over. It's like the COVID lockdowns or something like that. And so now we're in this place where we know what it is, but we can't do anything about it. Could also just be something simple. Another consequence is we might find it something simple as, people's internet structure and computing and so on.
Okay, so there's consequences there, but you're talking about if we do this, we then say the sequence of events is if we then hear these things and we don't do anything about it, then we're going to be in worse shape than we were before. So therefore we have to do it. So the idea behind this analysis is it helps us to determine our actions as we move forward with some of these things. So again, those are just... So
we ran out of time for the sequence.
Yeah, I figured that. And again, my apologies. Like I say, I've never done this online before and I'm enjoying it. So there we go. Guys, I just want to throw it back open and basically come back to some open discussion very briefly, because that's the time. One of the things I haven't been able to talk about, and I wouldn't have talked about anyway, is the sequencing. Clearly, when you have a set of tools, you use a set of tools in a wide variety of ways. So as you can see, I was putting RAD together, then aims, goals, and objectives. Then we come up with ideas. Then we do some assessments on that. So like building anything, you use your tools and then you use tools again. So you might use a consequence and sequel at the beginning and then later in the end. Same thing with that. So what it is that that basically it's sitting back and saying, how do we actually construct these things? And in a 2-day workshop, which is what this kind of stuff involves, that would be a whole half day of workshopping and things like that. So again, I just wanted to put it there and then just throw it open to people. Did you get anything today that could be useful in the work that you're doing in the learning transfer process? And if so, what might that be? And I'd really just like to find out some value, whether this had any, because my purpose was, does this have any application for the design of learning?
happy just to do a real quick one. I know it's short on time. I found it fascinating. This stuff does float my boat, but the yes, no, sorry, was it positive, negative, interesting? I think that's useful for me. So it's all useful, but that sticks out for me. I like that one.
Yeah, good, excellent.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the 10 acronyms and different ways to go deeper. Yeah, I have tools in design thinking and innovation, but that's another way of being. It's more comprehensive than the tools that I've seen before.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah, Bill, thanks very much. I enjoyed the use of tools to, I guess, get that deliberate thinking happening. I like that focus on deliberate thinking.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Anyone?
I like the acronym CITI more for strategic thinking than learning design. For learning design, I thought it was just helpful to revisit the Kirkpatrick stuff and to use that as a vehicle for discussions with the client. Really good. Thanks.
That's my thinking, David, as well, is that the Kirkpatrick thing, then you said, let's dig some questions in to find out some of these things. And I was interested to find in my own mind whether some of these might be of use. There are lots of different ways of doing it, but rather than just saying, what do you want? You say, what are your aims? What are your goals? What are your objectives? What are the key values involved? Things like that. So good.
Bill, I took a lot. Key thing is just to go back over a lot of the stuff that I'm doing and rethink. Am I thinking critically? Am I challenging? Am I asking the right questions each time? Because you just get stuck in doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it is that whole, as they say, sharpen the saw, go back and actually check on, am I getting the most value when I'm asking the questions? That's right. In fact, one of the slides that I've just taken out because of time was basically around that. It's about the effective use of the tool. Am I using the right tool? Am I using the tool objectively, or am I using it to defend my own view? And am I scanning widely enough for those things? And those are all part of the whole process that make it so important. Am I using, as it can be, am I using the wrong tool? If the only tool in my toolkit is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Yeah, and it's interesting with that because often when I used to start, I used to have a set of toy tools, and I'd say, isn't it interesting how a drill can look like a hammer at times and things like that? And the idea was it should be constructed like that process. So I see people are heading off, but that's great. Thank you very much for attending, and we're just over time, so my apologies. Carry it back to you. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, everybody. And Bill, thanks very much. I always think of critical thinking as hard, but you've made it very practical and lots of tips and tools. So thank you very much. I'm sure everybody's got lots of takeaways from today. So thank you for putting that together for us. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And Bill, what's the next masterclass coming up?
To be advised.
To be okay. One not to be missed. All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bill.